And the Black Knight starts to blast off.
Australia's space history is rich. Just the third nation to launch a satellite into space. The critical communications link to the first landing on the moon.
We were right there at the very beginning in the 60s. We were one of the first nations into space. We were right there in the game.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for
I think the nation knows we've lost a lot of momentum, but we've got the creativity, we've got the talent. We absolutely know we can be in this. No industry inspires the way that space does.
Dr. Megan Clark is the first head of the Australian Space Agency, which is barely weeks old. One of her earliest memories is seeing man's first satellite.
I was really little, and my dad took me out on the front lawn. I lived in Perth, and he pointed to Sputnik. And I remember him saying, "You have to remember this." And he pointed up, he says, "That's the future."
Now her agency is already giving the go-ahead for Australian designed and made parts and software to get off the planet.
We're certainly already seeing new technology and Australian technology that is going into space already just in the last few months. And we have already a pipeline for the next 12 to 18 months. This is more than we've done for decades.
The Australian space sector wants the new agency to provide a focal point for high-tech jobs. The Melbourne team is already creating world-beating NASA-backed virtual reality software. A number of Australian companies are making cheaper, lighter nanosatellites. Traditional rockets are being redesigned for low Earth orbit to reduce the cost of launch. So what about putting Australians on Mars?
I don't know the answer to that, but that question keeps coming up, doesn't it? Because space goes to those ambitions.
Even simply getting another Australian into space is proving a challenge.
It hasn't been possible. I mean, we've been advising NASA on human spaceflight for over 40 years, and yet we haven't had one of our Australian doctors as head of one of those medical missions. So we do need to create those opportunities for the next generation.
For now, she has a very earthbound decision to advise the government before the end of the year on which state her space agency headquarters should be based. That's caused a fierce competition.
We have SRB ignition and the history's largest astronaut crew is on its way.
Houston controlling now.
Dr. Carl Scully-Powell is the first Australian-born astronaut into space. He's now an ambassador for a bid by Western Sydney to host the agency in a planned aerotropolis at Badgerys Creek.
What can we in New South Wales do for the space agency? It's pretty obvious what we can do. Over 50% of the space-related revenue in Australia is in New South Wales. And by the way, from the ground up, big city, going to be west of Parramatta. It's going to be 21st century, high-tech. It's going to be huge.
Things are happening here. Infrastructure are built here. People are building things here. The biggest startup in the world are in Adelaide.
The satellite modem seems to be working.
Nano satellite maker Flavia Tata-Nardini used to work for the European Space Agency. Now she's backing Adelaide's bid to host the Australian agency.
Actually, South Australia created this space industry centre. So let's bring engineering when engineering is done. And this is where South Australia is, I think.
Not everyone agrees that just one state should host the agency HQ.
The Australian Space Agency headquarters should be in our nation's capital, Canberra, with nodes or centre of excellence in the various states.
So I think the nozzles really come up well.
But what Gold Coast rocket maker James Gilmore is convinced of is Australia's need for its own operational spaceport, just like New Zealand's Rocket Lab.
The New Zealand government took the initiative to support Rocket Lab, and now Rocket Lab is a billion-dollar company employing hundreds of people. Launch underpins everything. If you can't have access to space, then unfortunately you're going going nowhere.
The question around launch comes down to, do you have a commercial opportunity? So if you're going to have a launch facility, you need to have, if you like, a backlog of orders to use that to make it commercial. And then you need to have the right location. So the first question is still being answered.
For the next generation, just having an Australian space agency is already proving inspiring.
3, 2, 1, let it go!
Maybe find some more people to join so we can have more like rockets launching off in Australia.
And when you're ready, big strong push!
How do we colonise off Earth? How do we discover those things on moons and planets that we can't dream of? We want to be part of that because we want to showcase what Australia can do. And I think Australians are going to be inspired and proud about what Australia really can do.